It's a great conversation. Politicians have it all the time. Many people feel strongly about it. But the idea of the nanny state, too much state, intruding in our lives, yes, you could say I'm exactly one of those conservatives where I think generally less government is better, and that you should free the talents of the individuals and people should learn to take responsibility for everything, from parenting to standing on their own 2 feet, and the state steps in where those cannot be helped. Now, the idea of the nanny state intruding in all walks of life is something that's been talked about because one of Labour's great announcements on health, this is because they can't really talk about anything else because they can't spend any money yet until Rachel Reeves, their shadow chancellor, tells them, is about the state of poor decay in the country, which is terrible and driving apparently lots of visits to A&E of young kids. And it's saying the state has a role in getting your teeth brushed and a bit more than that. So the question is this a winner for Labour? Do they know something that the rest of us may not? Because just before I go to my next guest, no, in fact, I'll bring my next guest straight in, actually, on this. John Rentoul, chief political commentator of the Indepdent, good friend to the show. John, how are you?
Hello, Nick. Very well.
Have you brushed your teeth today?
I have.
Good man.
Absolutely.
And make sure you do
today.
it. Make sure you do it this evening as well. All right, there you go. Now, John, I'm going to say something really counterintuitive. During my time as an MP, and for many years since, I hear more and more often when something goes wrong, it doesn't matter whether it's a debt an individual might have incurred or something perhaps more national, the first line of attack is, what are the government going to do about it? And I am convinced that whilst I do not like the idea behind expanding the nanny state, the reality is I think this nation might actually embrace the idea that the state must intervene more. What do you say?
I think you're right. I mean, I think certainly we saw that in the coronavirus pandemic. People expected the state to step in and ensure that they kept their jobs and that businesses were kept afloat in quite an unprecedented way. I mean, Rishi Sunak spent £400 billion, borrowed £400 billion to keep the economy afloat. Now, I mean, as a sort of Keynesian, that makes sense. You pump money into the economy to avoid a recession. But there was certainly a very strong element in public opinion, I think, of people wanting the government to bail them out of every problem and to tell them exactly what to do, to stay in their homes and not go out.
The Social Market Foundation, because unusually I did a little bit of research on this before I came up with my theory or to back it up. They did some research in September that showed, for example, something like 65%, I'm probably out by a percentage point or two, of people think the state should be regulating more advertising to kids, not letting them see the junk food, alcohol, things like that. 76% think the state are not doing enough to tackle obesity. I think it was I haven't got it in front of me, I think it was 67% of people thought there should be price controls. I mean, this is communist Russia, and this is Britain. I mean, but on the serious political point, they will have, Labour will have tested this, won't they? They would have tested the idea.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, public opinion in this country is very statist. I mean, people are in favour of nationalising everything. You mention anything, and people would say, especially if you phrase it as public ownership. I mean, anything with the word public in, people like, and anything with the word private in, people don't like. I'm afraid, public opinion can be quite shallow, but that is what public opinion is like, and Labour have cottoned onto that, and they think this toothbrushing thing will be popular.
So is the problem here for Labour, in a sense, not that Keir Starmer's come out punching for the nanny state. I think he confused a few people, because I did rather have a little bit of a grin when I was reading MPs were coming out on Labour and saying, oh no, this isn't the nanny state, and then about 3 hours later he said it is, and we're gonna punch for it. But he's coming out punching for it. But in practice, then if you have more intervention from government, you're going to spend more. Rachel Reeves doesn't want them to commit to spending more, does she?
Absolutely. I mean, even, supervised toothbrushing of primary and pre-primary school age children is going to cost more, because you've got to have somebody to do it. The teaching unions say they won't do it, so it'll have to be teaching assistants or other people. But yes, it will cost a bit more. I mean, the toothbrushing thing actually is just a gimmick.
I knew you'd say that. I knew you'd say that. I do.
It's a very successful one, because we're talking about it, and you're absolutely right that I know a lot of journalists went into Keir Starmer's office the day before it was announced, where they were briefed by him, where they got the impression that he was saying, no, this isn't the Nanny State. And then obviously a light bulb had gone off in his head. And he thought, well, actually, I will defend it as the Nanny State, because it'll be a talking point, and people like Nick Dubois will start doing radio programmes about this and talking about Labour policy.
Yes, I'm sure he's very, very happy about that. I can see him cheering in the rafters that I am. And the interesting thing is, though, I'm not throwing stones at it. I'm looking at it as a tactic. I personally think the outcome will be questionable. We've got to do something about the problem. I suppose there's also logic, and I didn't hear them say this, but maybe you can correct me. There is some logic in saying, look, you anti-nanny staters like you, Nick Dubois, well, it hasn't been going too well for you, has it? Because look at the state of everyone's teeth.
I mean, that is true. But I mean, I do still feel personally that it is up to parents to...
Right, so let me press that with you. I'm going to take you back to my constituency office, and I think it's page 222 of Confessions of a Recovering MP, he said, just putting that plug in there. But the point is that I had a constituent come into my office who literally brought her 3 kids with her and her mother, and was essentially saying, I don't get enough money from the state. And I went through a list of questions and discussions with her, and I got to the point and I said, so tell me about the father, what does he help? How does he help? And the answer I got was, oh, well, he doesn't get enough money as it is anyway, which is why I'm here. And that is classic. That is classic. I don't expect the father to pay. He can go and buy whatever he wants with his money. I want the state to pay. I want John Rentoul to pay, Nick Dubois to pay. And that, I think, has been I'm going to put this to you, too much state intervention, too much welfare state. Is that part of the problem, that people now think it's the default position, the state should look after me?
I think you're confusing two things there, Nick, actually. I mean, supervised toothbrushing is one thing, but the level of benefits in this country is not generous. I mean, obviously there are some people who get money from the state who shouldn't. But broadly speaking, the welfare benefits system in this country is extremely parsimonious, and that's why we've seen the growth of food banks and all the rest of it. So no, I don't think the problem is that there are too many people.
But what about the mentality that says I shouldn't ask the kid's father to pay any money? I should go to the state first. I mean, it's ludicrous.
Obviously, I completely agree with you. In that case, and there has been a long-running problem of the child support agency trying to recover money from deadbeat dads, and that is a struggle that will go on. I mean, that is human nature. That will go on happening. Okay. You're quite right. People shouldn't be expecting the state to bail them out at every turn. But the state does have some responsibilities where parents fail. To children and to look after them, and that's why I'm opposed, for example, to the 2-child limit on state benefits.
Okay, so look, let's just move on to slightly different ground. I'm not sure if this is going to be the winner for Keir Starmer, but it's certainly, at least we're starting to see him flesh out some ideas and thoughts. I'd say the first 11 days of this year, 12 days, have actually been, how can I put it, OK for Rishi Sunak. He's not got economic bad news. In fact, he may even avoid recession in the first 6 months, if not in the whole year. Inflation still seems to be going in the right direction. He's certainly, I think, been, almost statesmanlike in the way that he handled the Yemeni affair. He's had a fairly good start to the week. I'm going to put this to you, that actually I've got a feeling the Conservative rebellions that we are anticipating next week on the Rwanda detail, on the bill for Rwanda, they might fall away. Do you get any sense of that?
I completely agree. I mean, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for the anti-immigration rebels to win any points on that, because they have to make common cause with Labour, and I think that's going to be difficult. I mean, obviously Labour are opposed to the Rwanda scheme altogether, and so they'll be wanting to vote against it, but they won't want to be in the same division lobbies as people whose criticism of the Rwanda scheme, the Rwanda bill, is that it's not tough enough. So I think that's a very difficult thing for the...
So it's not a bad start for Rishi Sunak, really. Do you sense that he might gain some comfort and momentum from this and start to believe there is a road back to possible victory?
I'm sure he'd like to believe that, Nick, but I'm afraid... And, you know, I mean, I sort of agree with you. I mean, I think he's generally speaking, a good Prime Minister who's doing the right things. But I'm afraid that is not what public opinion thinks. I'm afraid public opinion in this country has given up on the Tories, more given up on the Tories than on Rishi Sunak personally. Although people really don't like him. I mean, I don't agree with them.
Are they listening, though? Is there anything the Tories could do? Could they give you, John, a £2,000 pay rise through your tax, and you go, I'll stick with these guys because I'm going to stick to the plan rather than risk it all with Labour, as Rishi would have us think?
It might help, but I mean, if you cast your mind back to the run up to the '97 general election, the economy was doing quite well then. John Major and Kenneth Clarke were doing quite well. The economy was growing. People were better off. And what did people do? They said, "Oh, I think I can afford to take the risk of a Labour government now," and they all voted for Tony Blair in there.
Final question for you, because I can't resist it whilst I'm here. Why do politicians, and Ed Davey in particular, find it so hard to say sorry? He really should have just said sorry here, just for a bad judgment call, nothing else.
I mean, yeah. I mean, well, I suppose there is the sort of view that saying sorry doesn't actually help you because nobody believes you if you say sorry. But I mean, I tell you what's worse than saying sorry is not saying sorry, and doing what Ed Davey did and contorting himself in such an embarrassing way.
It's squirming. It's awful, and it confounds belief. Will he survive as leader of the Lib Dems, all 8 or 9 of them?
That's a very interesting question, because I was in Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday, and it was very interesting to see the Lib Dem bench. There was no Ed Davey. I mean, he probably genuinely did have personal reasons for not being there, but it was very interesting. Layla Moran, who he defeated for the leadership, was sitting at one end of the Lib Dem bench, and Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, was at the other end, both watching proceedings interestedly.
John Rentoul, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me this weekend.